They said her medals were fake, they whispered she had stolen valor, they mocked her sacrifice without ever knowing the truth, but what happened the day the president himself walked through those doors shook everyone to their core. This is not just a story about medals, it's a story about honor, betrayal, and a truth too powerful to stay hidden. And before we dive into it, if you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button right now and show some love to her, because family is what makes us strong in the toughest battles of life. It all began on a cold autumn morning in Washington, D.C., inside a crowded federal courtroom where reporters sat with cameras, officials whispered behind their folders, and curious citizens filled the gallery to witness what the media had labeled the stolen valor trial of the century. At the center of it all stood Captain Sarah Mitchell, a decorated combat veteran of the United States Army, a woman whose record spoke of bravery on foreign soil, countless lives saved under fire, and a quiet dignity that had carried her through battles most of us could not even imagine. She wore her uniform proudly that day, every ribbon and medal gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, but instead of admiration, the room buzzed with suspicion. Lawyers claimed she had fabricated her record, that she never earned those medals, that her Purple Heart, her Bronze Star, even her Silver Star were forgeries bought online. It was a shocking accusation, one that threatened to strip her not only of honor but of her very identity as a soldier. The prosecution painted a picture of deceit, a woman desperate for attention who had supposedly constructed a false narrative of heroism. They called witnesses who questioned records, waived documents that appeared incomplete, and raised doubt at every turn. The crowd murmured in disbelief, and even some of the younger soldiers watching seemed unsure whether to believe the woman before them. Sarah stood silently through it all, her jaw set, her back straight, her eyes clear but heavy with the weight of betrayal. She had spent her life serving her country, and now, in the very land she defended, she was forced to defend herself against lies designed to erase her sacrifice, but Sarah knew something the courtroom did not. She knew that behind the twisted narrative was a powerful hand, a retired general, once her commanding officer, who had despised the idea of a woman surpassing his own decorated record. Years earlier, Sarah had led a rescue mission that saved not only American soldiers but also foreign civilians in a war-torn region, and though the mission had earned her the president's attention and several commendations, it had also sparked jealousy. That general had influence, allies in politics, and enough power to manipulate records, bury reports, and create the illusion of fraud. Sarah understood she was not on trial because of stolen valor. She was on trial because she had dared to be a woman who outshined men who thought medals belonged only to them. As the trial dragged on, the tension became unbearable. On the third day, the prosecution announced they had final proof, an altered service record that supposedly showed Sarah never even served in the unit where she had claimed to earn her medals. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. Sarah's lawyer demanded time to examine the documents, but the damage was already done, the public began to turn, the whispers grew louder, and it seemed the verdict was all but decided. Sarah looked around the courtroom, saw the doubt in the faces of those who had once saluted her, and for a brief moment, she wondered if the truth would ever survive lies so carefully crafted. Then, just as the judge prepared to close the day's hearing, the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung open. A hush fell. Secret Service agents stepped in first, their presence commanding immediate silence. And then, walking with calm authority, came the President of the United States. Every camera turned. Every reporter's pen froze in midair. The judge's gavel hovered but never struck. The President walked straight to the center of the room, looked at Sarah, and then faced the court. "I was there," he said firmly, his voice echoing. "I pinned those medals on Captain Sarah Mitchell myself. I have never forgotten her courage, and I will not stand by while her honor is destroyed by lies." The room erupted in chaos, reporters shouting questions, people standing on benches to see, the judge pounding his gavel for order. But the President was not done. He turned toward the prosecution's so-called evidence and demanded the clerk hand him the file. With steady hands, he flipped through the pages, then looked up at the crowd. "These records are altered," he declared. "And I know who is responsible." His eyes scanned the courtroom, landing on the retired general sitting smugly in the back row. Gasps filled the room again as the president exposed how the general had orchestrated the entire charade, manipulating military archives to discredit Sarah. It wasn't just about medals, it was about ambition, ego, and silencing the truth. The general tried to stand, tried to speak, but his words were drowned by the fury of the courtroom. Federal investigators moved quickly, seizing evidence, and suddenly the man who had tried to destroy Sarah was himself placed under arrest. For the first time in weeks, Sarah allowed herself a breath of relief. The truth had not only survived, it had triumphed in the most public, undeniable way possible. The trial was over. But the story didn't end there. The president asked Sarah to stand with him as he addressed the nation from that very courtroom. With cameras rolling live, he reminded America what true service looked like, not medals alone, but sacrifice, integrity, and the courage to keep fighting even when your own people doubt you. Captain Mitchell, he said, turning to her with genuine respect, is the kind of soldier every American should be proud of. And today, we don't just defend her honor, we defend the honor of every man and woman who has ever put on the uniform and been willing to give everything for this country. The gallery erupted in applause, some in tears, some saluting, all united in a moment of clarity that no lie could erase. Sarah's life would never be the same. The accusations had scarred her, but the truth had restored her in a way even she hadn't expected. She was invited to speak at military academies, to mentor young soldiers, to remind them that the path of honor is rarely easy but always worth it. And yet, through it all, she remained humble, still carrying the same quiet dignity she had shown on the battlefield and in the courtroom. She never wore her medals for glory, she wore them for the brothers and sisters she lost overseas, for the ones who never made it home. The general who tried to destroy her faced trial himself, exposed not only for falsifying records but for corruption in contracts and abuse of power. His downfall became a lesson in arrogance, while Sarah's victory became a symbol of resilience. People across the country who had doubted her wrote letters of apology. Veterans who had stayed silent out of fear of disbelief came forward with their own stories, inspired by Sarah's courage to stand tall against lies. The courtroom that once echoed with accusations now echoed with truth, a truth so strong it could not be buried by envy or deceit. And so, her story became more than just a courtroom drama, it became a reminder to the nation that the truth will always find a way to shine, even through the darkest shadows. Sarah Mitchell's medals were not just pieces of metal and ribbon, they were stories of sacrifice, of nights under fire, of lives saved in desperate moments. They were proof that honor is not something you buy or fabricate, it is something you earn when no one is watching, when the world may never know your name. So the next time someone doubts the sacrifices of our veterans, let them remember Sarah's story, the day a courtroom tried to erase her courage, and the day the president himself walked in to set the record straight. Because honor is not granted by the loudest voice in the room, it is preserved by truth, and truth will always rise. And now I want to ask you, where are you watching this from? Which part of this great country are you tuning in from today?